I've been thinking about how to sum up these last 2 weeks because this is our very first podcast of the new Dawn and Steve Plus podcast.
Well, yeah. How would you sum up the past 2 weeks then, if you've been thinking about this?
Oh, I have. I've been thinking about it, praying about it. I know you guys have too.
Oh,
and just for our first podcast, like we're still together as a team. Briggs is still very much part of the team. So all three of us have been really pressing into the Lord to see what he would have us do. And he was very clear that we could step into this space. Very thankful for that. My summation of the last couple of weeks, it hurts.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sure that there are some of you who are wondering what in the world happened. Yeah. And it was about 2 weeks ago that we were just told that the show was done. And so you're like, okay, we didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye, which was sad for us. Many of you have become friends, even if it wasn't face-to-face. It was, over email, over text. And so not to have the opportunities to say goodbye was also one of those things that was a serious bummer. I mean, that hurt.
It hurts.
Yeah.
I think the first weekend I grieved so much for our listeners because no information was really given and we weren't able to give information for whatever reason. I'm still unclear on that one. And for colleagues that we love, colleagues that we've built friendships with. It just hurt. It really was. I used the word shocking, and my hubby Ben said, well, maybe that's what has everybody in an uproar. And I'm like, but it was shocking.
It was.
It was 5 minutes after our last show, we were told, hey, that was your last show. Wait, what? I remember sitting there going, what is happening right now? And I can still, can't you just picture yourself in that room?
You can still kind of feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
You take yourself back to where you were in that moment and the emotions of that moment. Mm. Yeah.
It gets really still even right here when you think about just that morning and in the realm of care. I've only had 2 other times in my life where I felt that almost disassociated. Like, like my body is sitting right here, but this can't be happening right now. And as my counselor said, like, it's disorienting to me, Dawn. I can't even imagine how disorienting it is to you and Steve and Briggs. And to try to make sense of this has been really, really difficult.
Yeah. I, at that point, remember thinking, not only does it hurt that we didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye, but one of the other things, and a friend of mine who is involved in radio, who had something like this happen to him before, said the other thing that this does is it kind of strikes at identity.
True.
Because there's an element of you're living your life in front of a listener every day. And you're, to a certain degree, making yourself vulnerable, sharing what's going on in your life, what God's been doing in your life, what's going on in your family's life, what's going on in the world, and how you think about all that. And you're putting an element of yourself out there for the public to criticize or embrace.
Yeah.
And we got both.
Sure.
But then all of a sudden, when that is just instantaneously removed like that, you're like, wait, oh, okay, what does that mean for kind of how I spent so much of my time and my day, and how you even maybe identify as, well, maybe it's more, I don't know if it's more of a guy thing than a female thing, but what do guys say when they meet? What's your name? What do you do?
Yep, right.
I'm Steve. I'm involved in radio.
Yep.
All of a sudden you're not involved in radio in the same way that you were before. And so I think that it strikes at identity too.
I ran into somebody today, and I was having breakfast with a friend and a gentleman that I've known for years. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he goes, I know somebody famous. And I'm like, no. Now, I would have said no before because I've always said that my claim to fame is Ben's wife, mom to Alex, Micah, and Hannah. Like, that is my claim to fame. I knew what he meant, but I was just like, oh, I don't even know. Like, he clearly didn't know.
Yeah.
And I just didn't quite know. I still don't quite know what to say when people say, hey, are you still? And I'm like, no, that changed a couple of weeks ago. No, I wasn't expecting it. And yet I do know, So through these last couple of weeks, you're like, okay, Lord, that was the call you placed in my life. You talk about identity.
Yeah.
That's wrapped up into it. Also, this is a call. Like, you can't just step into this and embrace it in the way I think the Lord would want you to, unless he gives you that compulsion to serve him in that way. And so to have that removed, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do, Lord? I felt very much in the zone that he had asked me to be serving him in.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't. And so these last 2 weeks have felt like 2 years.
Time is like so out of whack.
Yeah.
Mentally, right?
So out of whack.
Yeah. So as the reality of the situation began to settle in.
Oh, it did? Well, look at you.
There's the element of that moment of absolute shock. Like, wait a minute, is this really happening? Yeah. But then at a certain point, I'm assuming you went home and told Ben. I went home and told Susie.
Oh, yeah.
We told the kids. Mm-hmm. We begin to, people in our lives, begin to, hey, what's going on? And you begin to have to share this. And whether, the reality kicks in quickly or the reality kicks in slowly.
Right.
And in my case, I would say it's been slowly.
Yep.
The reality does slowly begin to sink in, and you begin to realize, oh, that chapter of life is done. It's over. Mm-hmm. It may look something somewhat similar-ish down the road. I don't know. Yeah. But at least that is done. Mm-hmm. And so as you began to kind of sit with that, what'd you do?
Yeah. I can't wait to hear what you did because we haven't talked.
No.
Other than...
This is our first time really behind mics and talking about all this.
Fleshing this out.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was, the Lord has been teaching me since July. He kept putting in my heart, serve me today. This is all I want you to do. I want you to serve me today. And that was kind of the first thing that popped into my mind. So that was a Friday that we found that out. I think it was Saturday. And I'm like, Lord, what do I do? Now, it was a weekend, and it was Labor Day weekend, so that was helpful, kind of. But I kept hearing him say, serve me today. I'm going to give you people to interact with. I'm going to give you phone calls to field and lots of messages, which have been balm to my soul.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to serve me today. And I thought, okay, that looks different. But it was very clear. And so as I served him in a day, whatever was coming, and still that's kind of the thing today, he also would take me to his word, and he said, I'm like, but everything's changed. How am I supposed to serve? What do you want me to do? I'm not sure which way to turn. And he said, but what hasn't changed? Philippians 4:8 hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I want you to go there. And so I did. And those are the verses that says whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's lovely, whatever's praiseworthy, think on these things. And I thought, oh, my goodness, Lord. My whole world can be turned upside down, but these truths never change.
Yeah.
And so I would sit there, and it wasn't like, oh, just put a scripture verse. No, this was like my breath. This is what I could get, the plumb line of a wall or whatever, so you can... And that was the plumb line, to go back and realize everything else is going to shift, and it's going to shift again. This is not going to change. The Lord is not going to change. I still am who I say I am. And so that was where he just had me go back to his character and his word, so that I could have some kind of peace, some kind of, understanding.
Yeah.
And stop rocking, because the world was rocking. It's still... I'm not sure,
Yeah.
But that's how he's comforted me this whole time, is just to say, I haven't changed. And so serving me today is still as true today as it was August 30th when you got behind the microphone.
Yeah.
What about you?
That's good. Yeah, I think the biggest thing the thought that kept running through my head over and over and over initially was, well, here's a chance to believe all those things that you say you believe. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing how, as I kept going back to the nature and the character of God and who he is, how much peace came with that. I know I talked about this a little bit before. We had done the Experiencing God study 2 times in 2023. And one of the things that, it kept coming back to is it's God's plan, and how are you going to join in? And then I was reading a book from Barry McGuire, and he kept going back to, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so, do I believe these things or not? And I do. And so when I went home and shared the news with Susie, again, she was like, unbelievable peace. Like, this didn't catch God by surprise, caught us by surprise, but not him. And we have seen him be faithful and be all those things that he says he is in Scripture so many times over the past handful of years that we're like, why would we begin to doubt now? We may doubt what we're going to do tomorrow, but we're not going to doubt him at all. And the fact that he's got this and he'll take care of us, and we don't know what that looks like exactly, but there's a tremendous amount of peace that comes with just going back to knowing him and knowing who he is.
And it's that plumb line again. He is not going to change. That's been so real for your family, for our family, for the Briggs family. I know one thing, many people said right away, well, you guys should start a podcast. And at first, when I heard that, I was like, yeah,
maybe.
I mean, we could. It was something, though, I didn't want to jump into unless I knew the Lord said, no, like, I want you to start the podcast. Because just because something makes sense because of your training and time in the chair or whatever, doesn't mean it's what you should do. Like, I didn't want to work it out myself. And I talked to so many sweet, sweet friends and kind relatives, and it was, well, where do you think you should apply? And what do you think, where should you? And I just kept hearing the Lord say, and this is not the case every time. I know that. But in this case, at this time, I could hear the Lord say, be still and serve me today and what I give you. And I'm like, because I had no ideas, like, where to put in. I know I don't care to go work at a grocery store. Like, I don't care what I do. I want to serve him wherever that is. So I kept thinking, okay, Lord, until you impress upon me what to do. And the podcast idea kept coming through many, many different people. And we didn't get to talk.
No.
We were kind of, just because you had things going, you were already scheduled to be on vacation.
Right, exactly.
Hey, happy vacation.
Yeah, right. And so the very next day, my sister and her husband were coming into town. So I went by myself to pick them up at the airport so I could kind of drop the news and say, hey, this is what you guys are walking into. So if anybody's a little weird, that's why. But they actually were a gift from God, too, because they were such a great distraction and encouragement at the same time, like distracting from, because I'd planned to be off that week anyway and to spend time and hang out with them. And so that's what I did. And then the following week, they left on, they came on a Saturday. They left the following Saturday. The next day, I left for a freelance job that I've been doing for like the past 18 years and went back and worked with that team again this year. And so that was another way that I saw God's kindness in this, was just surrounding me with people that I could talk with about some of the stuff, but yet still also, at least that second week, have a little bit of income, which was great. And the other thing that did, though, I don't think I've told you this. I was at Southern Indiana, working with a network of about 8 radio stations, and we were really doing a fundraiser was the main thing. But at one point, things got really slow, and just kind of began to pray, God, if you want this thing to happen, you're going to have to do it. And so whatever you want. And he showed up in this crazy, huge way the final day. But in that second to last day, when things were really, really slow, we're like, you know what? Let's just spend some time talking about God and who he is and why we even do Christian radio to begin with, and the purpose, and wanting to get the gospel message out to as many people as we can. And I realized in that moment that I don't want to be done with this. Yeah, it was that, like, God, I don't know what you want to do with it, but as long as you give me the opportunity, the platform, the microphone, and breath in my lungs, that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. While we were praying and you were on vacation and then going to do that, Ben and I kept thinking, like, but the team's not done.
Yeah.
We may have been removed from our positions for purposes of a network wanting to do what they wanted to do. But our team, God put together. And when we finally did get to talk, I was so waiting to hear what you all had been praying about. And you told me that. You said, God's not done. We're not done. And I remember sitting there, Ben and I were sitting there, and I was like, that's you, Lord. That's you. Because why would he give you all in your household and us in our household and Briggs in their household the same answer as we sought him if he wasn't going to be in this? And then we could say, podcast? Okay, Lord. As long as it's your podcast.
Right.
We'll do it. And so now we don't know what it looks like.
We got a blank slate.
This is first. It's like version 1. There's going to be version 2. It's going to be fun, though, to see how the Lord has gone before us. I cannot wait to unfold the story. That's part of it, just the alignment of what he's given our 3 families. And then that's kind of enough, and it's kind of not enough. This is why it feels like 2 years. The following week, after, was it a week? Even 4 days. Wait, I'm losing my timeline. But it's like 3 or 4 days when you finally got home and we all finally got together and sat and prayed and talked. And other friends stepped in and said, hey, we've got space. Why don't you guys use this to do your podcast? And hey, we've got this. And why don't y'all do that? And we're like, oh. Yeah. Lord, you're serious.
You see his hand all over it, don't you?
All over it.
Yeah.
All over it. So here we are.
Yeah. So podcast number 1, I think we should call it Don and Steve in Mourning.
Oh, Mourning. Yes, sir.
Yes. And kind of expectantly celebrating too.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope you'll join us for this journey because it's going to be God's story, and it's going to be your God story as well as ours because we're family. And that was one thing we did not want to let go of, our family, and that includes our extended family. So thank you for taking a chance. Thank you for being with us. And yeah, that's why we call it Don and Steve Plus.
Yeah, Don and Steve plus you. And plus Briggs, and plus coffee, and British tea, and all the things, the Word of God that we're going to be spending time talking about, plus guests, and I think we're going to have a good time together. So hope that you'll like and subscribe and follow us on socials. Do you even know what socials we're on?
Okay, so I know we're on Facebook, Don and Steve Plus. I know we're on YouTube, Instagram, and Rumble. It's a good thing we've got a millennial with us. Top out a millennial, I think, but he's there. He knows the stuff, right? So if you'll go and like and subscribe, then we can keep you in the loop, and you'll find out who all the pluses are as they join you to be part of Don and Steve.